Imagine getting high-speed internet in the middle of the Sahara Desert or on top of the Himalayas. No cables, no towers, just a small dish pointing at the sky. Satellite internet isn't new, but the old version was slow, expensive, and full of lag. Today, companies like Starlink, OneWeb, and GeoSpace are launching thousands of satellites into low Earth orbit. But here's the real question. How does it actually work? And why does physics say it might fail inside your city apartment? Let's break it down. Okay, so how does satellite internet actually work? You can kind of think of a satellite like a giant mirror floating in space. When you click a link, here's what happens. First, your dish sends a radio signal up to the satellite. Then, the satellite reflects that signal down to a ground station. After that, the ground station connects to fiber cables and, well, the global internet. The satellite itself doesn't really store the internet. It just redirects signals, acting like a mirror in the sky. Let's talk about old versus new satellites for a second. The older satellites were placed in what's called geostationary orbit, or GEO, which is about 35,000 kilometers above Earth. Because signals had to travel such a long distance, there was usually a delay of around 600 milliseconds. Newer systems use something called low Earth orbit, or LEO, and these are only about 550 kilometers high. That shorter distance means you get much lower latency. Old versus new satellites, once again. The older satellites were set up in geostationary orbit, or GEO, about 35,000 kilometers above Earth. Signals had to travel really far, which caused a 600 millisecond delay. But now, new systems use low Earth orbit, or LEO, just around 550 kilometers high. That shorter distance leads to lower latency. Now delays are around 30 milliseconds, fast enough for gaming and video calls. That's the revolution. Where is it used today? Satellite internet is already live in more than 70 countries. It really shines where cables just can't go. War zones like keeping Ukraine online, disaster relief after hurricanes, airplanes and cruise ships, rural farms and remote villages. If fiber ends at your village border, satellite begins. The physics problem, why walls beat satellites. Now let's talk science. It all comes down to frequency and wavelength. Alright, let's take a closer look at the science behind obstruction. You know, it's actually pretty fascinating how different signals interact with the world around us, and why some signals can get blocked more easily than others. So, cell towers versus satellites. Cell towers, they use lower frequencies, like, say, 700 megahertz. These waves are long, meters in length actually. And well, long waves can pass through walls more easily. On the other hand, satellite internet uses Q and K bands, which are in the 12 to 40 gigahertz range. These are millimeter waves, meaning, yeah, the wavelength is super short. Now, short waves behave differently. They just can't easily pass through concrete. They get blocked by roofs, and honestly, even tree branches can stop them. That's exactly why your satellite dish has to be outside, with a clear view of the sky. Physics just doesn't allow for indoor use, no matter how much we might want it. Rain fade, when water fights back. Here's another science twist. Heavy rain can weaken satellite signals. Why? Because water droplets are similar in size to the signal's wavelength. When that happens, the waves scatter and lose energy. This effect is called attenuation. In heavy Indian monsoon conditions, your signal may drop. Fiber cables are underground. Cell towers use lower frequencies that ignore rain. But satellite signals are more sensitive. urban environments bring their own set of challenges for satellite signals, like, tall buildings and dense structures that can block or reflect the waves. So, while fiber and cellular networks have their ways to deal with weather and obstacles, satellite connections remain, a bit more vulnerable. Still, understanding these factors helps us design better, more reliable communication systems for the future. The urban problem. Fresnel Zone. You might think, I can see the sky, so it should work, right? Well, not exactly. Radio waves don't travel in a thin laser beam. Instead, they move through a football-shaped region called the Fresnel Zone. If buildings, water tanks, or trees block even part of that zone, the signal weakens. This is why satellite works beautifully in open villages, on mountains, and in deserts. But it really struggles between tall buildings and on crowded city rooftops. Final verdict: future or hype? So, should you cancel your fiber connection? Absolutely not. If you have fiber or strong 5G, it's cheaper, more stable, rainproof, and better for dense cities. But if you live where cables don't reach, satellite internet is a miracle. Ground wins for reliability. Space wins for coverage. It's not a replacement, it's a partnership. Satellite internet isn't hype. It's specialized technology solving a different problem. If you enjoyed this physics breakdown, like, share, and subscribe for more science-powered tech explanations. See you in the next deep dive.